Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Jessica. I'm the head of reader services at the Chelmsford Library, and this is our show, Bookmarked. I have with me Deanna Parsi. I'll introduce her in a little bit, but before we get started, I just have a couple of program announcements. We are revisiting One Book 2020 with a virtual visit from Ann Hood. Remember when we had her scheduled back in March? Well, she's going to be joining us at 7 p.m. on November 19th. You can register in advance to receive the link to join the event. And we would really love it if you could send your questions. You can send them to me. My email address is on the website, Jessica FitzHanso. And we'll ask them during the program. We'll kind of build them into the program for the moderator. We are open to the public at the moment. We have extended our hours slightly. We are now open at 9:30 a.m. and stay open through 8:30 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 4:30 p.m. Friday and Saturday. And of course, there's always curbside service available if you prefer. Otherwise, our art series and armchair traveler series continue, as do our virtual trivia nights. And our book groups and other discussion groups are in full swing again, all taking place on Zoom. Register on our calendar. If you're interested in learning more about any of these, visit our website at chelmsfordlibrary.org. And while you're there, sign up for our newsletter, and you can also give us a call or come in to ask us. And so with that, I will begin our show. For those of you that have not been in lately, we have a new staff librarian. This is Deanna Parsi. She works with me in reader services and can also be found at the reference desk on the lower level. Deanna is a really big reader and will most certainly have some great recommendations for you when you visit. And she's also been hard at work since she started creating new reading lists and articles for our website. So check those out if you're looking for suggestions. For today's show, with it being spooky season, we've decided to take a look at the genre of Gothic fiction. I've brought with me some classics of the genre, and Deanna has brought some updates, some more contemporary titles. The first example I brought with me is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and revisiting this novel for the first time in about 10 years has rekindled my love of the language and nuance of character that Shelley writes. Victor Frankenstein is imbued with a dangerous pride in the beginning, swept up as a student by his pursuit to capture and control the creation of life. His obsession makes him very ill, but he does ultimately succeed. His monster is hideous, though, and he's horrified. All his efforts to make his creation beautiful clash terribly with the final results. The monster, seen at first as a brutish animal-like entity, runs off and disappears. Victor Frankenstein considers this to be a great fortune, but that is in no way the end of the story. As we find out later, the monster himself is consumed with the accident of his existence, the tragedy of having been animated with little purpose but the selfish interests of the doctor, and he broods over this and seeks revenge. And from this, Victor Frankenstein, within the world of the novel, of course, the horror is that Victor Frankenstein will never live down his mistake, his folly of trying to control life and control this other being's existence. Of course, Shelley is doing something a little bit different here in the way that she's using the haunted creature of the monster to play the habitat for our fears and obsessions, where typically an actual house plays that role. So we all know the trope of the haunted house. Henry James, in The Turn of the Screw, spends a great deal of time describing the immensity of the house and the expanse of the grounds as encountered by the main character, a young governess hired to care for two young children, nephew and niece to her employer, as he's otherwise occupied and too busy to raise them himself. The strangeness of the surroundings she encounters, the time she has to mull over the strange events as she wanders around the grounds, and the strangeness of the children in her care all contribute to the atmosphere of foreboding, into which the ghosts finally appear to her, and she's certain of it to the children. Her efforts to protect them and uncover the mystery of their appearance only cause her to be a less than trustworthy witness for the reader as she descends into, some might say, a madness. Did the ghosts really appear? Did the children actually see them and are hiding this fact from her? And who does she have to turn to? The frame of The Turn of the Screw and Frankenstein are in the form of a story being told to an uninvolved party, and this only leads to a further sense of imbalance and disorientation. Dr. Frankenstein, in the midst of his pursuit of the monster, is relaying the story to a ship's captain traveling with Victor, and then is relayed to us, the readers. The governess's story is being read aloud from her manuscripts years later, after she's died. Other examples of the genre, though, do not have as much remove and feel more immediate. In Rebecca, our main character has very little knowledge of the tragic events that occurred before she came to Manderley, only picking up the pieces as the story unfolds, and she is dragged into its clutches. In a similar way, Maricat, the main character of We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, at first seems not to be one of the major players or aware of all of the major events. She drops hints as we follow her across town and in her encounters with her family. The horrific events are slowly pieced together, and the reader must chase the clues from character to character. By the time the entirety of it is fully revealed, another major event threatens to end the family for good. As in The Turn of the Screw in Rebecca, the house looms large and We Have Always Lived in the Castle. The interior and rear exterior of the house are the little family's entire world. And certain rooms of the house, certain pieces of furniture, and certain heirlooms serve as witnesses along with the members of the family to the horror that's occurred. So those are some brief touchstones in the Gothic and American Gothic literature. I also revisited some of the stories of Edgar Allan Poe for this piece. The way he arranged language and employed repetition forces the reader to slow down, adding to the suspenseful atmosphere. There are also some supreme examples of unreliable narrators, horrific events like murderous cats and people being buried in walls, and stories that extend beyond the text that serve as excellent taut companions to the season. And now, I'll turn it over to Deanna, who has brought some more recent examples that offer some nice modern twists on some of the classic tropes.
So thanks, Jessica. I was really glad that we were talking about Gothics today. It's something, kind of one of the first things I remember reading, like reading Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights and just loving them. But one of the differences, though, is kind of what you were talking about, Gothic horror versus the Gothic romance that kind of takes all of those elements of Gothic, but then adds, a dashing hero to come in and save the day, right? So over the years, that's kind of morphed into different things, but, still kind of seems like a fairly traditional genre. But these two books I'm going to talk about today actually, are kind of breaking some new ground, I think, in the genre and adding some new voices to it. So the first one is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. So Moreno-Garcia, she's written numerous books already, and she incorporates her Mexican heritage into it. So, she's kind of playing with the boundaries of Gothic and mythology and horror and fantasy, kind of melding them together using her culture and traditions and whatnot. And she also is a science fiction and fantasy columnist for the Washington Post, which I thought was interesting. So she's definitely kind of immersed in this world. Mm-hmm. So Mexican Gothic is set in 1950s Mexico, and the main character is a young socialite named Noemi, who basically, that's her life, is ease and parties. And one night she gets called home from one of her parties. Her cousin Catalina, who has recently married a mysterious Englishman and retired to the Mexican countryside, she's written this very disturbing letter, and they're very worried about her. So for a series of reasons, her father sends Noemi to find out what's happening with her cousin. So she gets to the old crumbling mansion, the Gothic mansion of High Place. And the family's money has come from like a local silver mine, and that's been closed for many years. So it's clear, like they've got some declining fortunes. And so with Catalina and her husband, Virgil Doyle, there's Virgil's father, Howard, there's his aunt, Florence, and his cousin, Florence's son, Francis. And Noemi arrives and she wants to see her cousin, but they keep saying, oh, she's very sick, and she gets, she's not allowed to go and see her. When she finally does, Catalina talks about hearing voices in the walls, and she's so paranoid that she's being poisoned. And so at first, Noemi just thinks, oh, my cousin needs a psychiatrist, right? But she gets a pushback from the husband. He's like, nobody's leaving High Place. So she settles into High Place, and at first she kind of just rebels against all the rules they have. There's rules like no talking at dinner, no smoking, you can't use the electricity, you have to be chaperoned when you go into town, and she hates it. But then she starts having, like, hearing voices and having hallucinations and sleepwalking, and she's like, there is something really wrong here. So she then enlists Francis, the cousin, and starts learning about High Place. And so she finds out that Howard, the father, is really into eugenics, and he thinks that, his British heritage kind of trumps their Mexican heritage. And so, she finds it very odd then that, he let his son marry, a Mexican woman. So, so there's that going on behind the scenes, and then the silver mine, you find out, also closed because of a mysterious illness that basically came in and, like, killed everybody. Mm-hmm. So, there's all these things kind of going on, plus, when she's in the house and, having these, like, visions and hearing things. So something's really wrong. And I'm going to kind of stop it there, because here's, like, where, like, all the supernatural stuff and all of the kind of the horror elements of this particular Gothic come into play, and I don't want to ruin that for anybody. Mm-hmm. But I find it really interesting, for two reasons. Noemi is kind of unappreciated, I think, so within this family that she has, come to visit with her for her cousin, she is kind of seen as inferior, an inferior race, for the father. But then at home, like, she's just seen as the flighty socialite, mm-hmm. right? But she's neither of those things. And, and one of the ways that this kind of breaks out from kind of a basic, Gothic romance is that in the end, Noemi's going to have to become her own heroine, mm-hmm. which I found very appealing. And so did reviewers. One reviewer called it a feminist Gothic. They said, I'm quoting, possible to create a believable female protagonist who defies not just the Doyles, but the patriarchy of her time. And other reviewers are talking about, kind of the slow play and the slow reveal about, like, all the doings at High Place. And also, people are liking it enough that this has already been optioned for a TV series, yeah. which I think maybe would make a really spooky show. So why should we read this book? Like, I think that, one, because it is genre bending, like this term feminist Gothic, which I kind of like, where, she's going to have to face up to it herself. I like the supernatural element to it. So, as far as Gothic supernatural goes, this has it in spades. So there's an ancient curse. Mm-hmm. There's, like, a very, very dark family secret. There's mental and physical manifestations of the horror, so you never quite know what's coming next. Yeah. And there's the unsettled spirits of those long gone. And so if you like those kinds of things, like if you liked the old Gothics, Jane Eyre and whatnot, or if you like Sarah Waters, Kate Morton, Diane Setterfield, if you've read Wych Elm by Tana French, mm-hmm. or The Death of Mrs. Westaway by Ruth Ware, and you mm-hmm. liked those, then I think that you would like Mexican Gothic.
Oh, that sounds so good.
It was a really great read. And the second one is also a really great read, Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth. So Emily Danforth, she teaches creative writing and literature at the Rhode Island College. She's written one other book. It was a YA novel called The Miseducation of Cameron Post, which is actually turned into a movie in 2018. So Plain Bad Heroines is her first adult novel. Danforth, she was born and raised in Montana, which turns out to be kind of important because one of the major plot points of Plain Bad Heroines revolves around a book called The Story of Mary McLean. And when I first started reading the book, I thought, like everything, it was fiction, that it was made up. But it turns out that Mary McLean was a real person. And around the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, she wrote this series of, like, shocking and risque memoirs, she was known as the Wild Woman of Butte, Montana. She had a very sordid reputation. She was openly bisexual. She was a vocal feminist, back in the time where, women just didn't do those things. And so being from Montana, Emily Danforth is like, how did I not know that this woman existed? And she had come across her in a footnote and decided that she needed to be more than a footnote, and so she's incorporated her into this story. And she uses, which is a really long quote, but I'm just going to use the beginning and end of it. Mary MacLane wrote, "There never seemed to be any plain heroines except Jane Eyre, and she was very unsatisfactory. She should have entered into marriage with her beloved Rochester in the first place. I should have. Let there be a dozen mad wives upstairs." And then she says, "But anyway, I wish someone would write a book about a plain bad heroine so that I might feel in real sympathy with her," which I just think is totally fantastic. So there's lots of plain bad heroines in the book because it goes back and forth between two time periods. First, 1902 at the Brookhant School for Girls, very exclusive boarding school, and then the present day where they are making a film about the events that happened at Brookhant School for Girls. So in 1902, the students, the girls there, are totally enthralled by Mary MacLane. They're totally obsessed with her. They've created a plain bad heroine society, and they're a little bit encouraged by their school headmistress, Libby Brookhant, who she herself has a copy of the Mary MacLane book. And much against kind of her partner, Alexandra, has very big misgivings about that, and they kind of fight about it a little bit, but she encourages the girls. But then what happens is two of the girls, Flo and Clara, meet a very, very grim death. Oh, no. And let's just say, if you're afraid of bees, this is not going to help in any way. But so when they're discovered, they're found with the book, and Alex decides, that the book is cursed. And then it goes to the present, and in the present we have Harper, who's kind of a rising A-list, hot movie actor. There's Audrey, who is kind of a B-list movie actor, but she's from a very old Hollywood family. And then there's Merritt, who is a writer, and she's written the book about Brookhants that this movie is going to be based on. And so Audrey auditions. She's going to play opposite Harper. They're going to be Flo and Clara. They're going to be these two young students. And then the producer takes her aside and says, well, we're going to make a movie within a movie. So we're going to, kind of artificially insert like these spooky, scary things, but they're going to be fake, and only you are going to know that they're fake. And you guys are just gonna, react to all of these things. And then we're going to incorporate that kind of mock documentary footage into the movie. So we're going back and forth between, these two timelines. And really, it's just kind of a vehicle for that gradual reveal of everything that happened in Brookhants, not just with the deaths of Flo and Clara, but kind of what came before and what came after. So you get kind of like this whole history, which was really fantastic. It's getting a lot of starred reviews. In places, it's getting, it's being added to kind of all the most anticipated lists, the most anticipated thrillers of the fall, the most anticipated, LGBTQ authors. And then two great review quotes, one from Shelf Awareness. Danforth delivers her narrative in an urbane, droll voice akin to Victorian novelists writing for BuzzFeed.
Wow. And
then Book Reporter says, it's the ghostly sensibility of Sarah Waters with the dark imagination of Marisha Pessel and the sharp humor and incisive social commentary of Curtis Sittenfeld. So if that right there doesn't give you a reason to read these books, right? It is also just like Mexican Gothic, genre bending, giving new voices into the genre. So, this has got a diverse cast, largely gay and lesbian cast, which is a big step forward for horror and Gothic. There's not a lot out there. And then it's a great example of what's called metafiction, and I did not know what that was. So if you aren't familiar with the term, metafiction is a form of fiction that emphasizes its own construct in a way that kind of continually reminds readers to be aware that they're reading fiction. So it's kind of blending that line between fiction and reality. And that was actually one of my favorite things about this book, is the narrator, that narrator who's like omniscient and self-aware and quirky and funny and serious and in telling these stories. You know, the ending felt a little abrupt to me, and I decided that was because I was perfectly willing to keep reading. Like if it had kept going, I would have kept going. But other reasons to read it are all these heroines in this book. You know, Libby and Alex, especially in 1902, kind of trying to lead their, you know, lives for their true selves when, you know, in a time where that was frowned upon. So read-alikes, you know, you heard Sarah Waters, Marisha Pessel. If you liked Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, if you liked Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. And then also, you know, kind of along that train, we were talking about kind of queer Gothic, Goodreads has a really great list of like more than 30 titles. So if that's one of the things that attracts you to this book, there's a lot more to read, which is fantastic. So I think that both of these titles are really great examples of, you know, these authors kind of taking the genre into the 21st century.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Those both sound really good, especially Plain Bad Heroines. I definitely want to read that one. All right, so those are our selections for Gothic fiction. So to celebrate the season, why not pick one up? We'll have the list of those on our blog, on our website, for you to refer to later. Now we're going to start the lightning round. The lightning round is our way of introducing you to some of the titles that we're really excited about now, came out recently in different genres. So I'm going to get started with, we're just going to give you like a brief glimpse at what these books are about, and then we'll add those to our list too. So first one that I have is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. In the world of suspense novels, what if your desire to get away from it all for a bit turned into the vacation that never ended? A Brooklyn couple wants to get off the grid for a bit and rents a nice vacation house in the Hamptons. They settle in to unwind when suddenly the owners of the house arrive unexpectedly. Turns out New York has experienced a major blackout, and no one has any information. The couple's coexistence is tense, neither wants to leave, and as other strange events occur, the author inserts wry, poignant observations about people's attitudes towards contemporary life, class, and race. So it's much more than just your average suspense novel. Is this the end? Has everyone else regained connectivity? Will they ever get back? Do the occupants really care one way or another? So that's Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. It's not his first novel. Rich and Pretty was one of his previous titles, and it just came out in the beginning of October, already along Hold's list.
Oh, great. That sounds really good. I think I'm going to add that to my reserve list. The first one I have is When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole, and this is one of the big buzz books for the fall. Reviewers are calling it Rear Window meets Get Out.
Oh, wow.
I know. It's a psychological thriller about the gentrification of a Brooklyn neighborhood. So the two main characters, Sydney and Theo, are kind of sad about the gentrification of their neighborhood. So they start a neighborhood walking tour. But the more they learn about the history of the neighborhood, the more that they start to wonder and to worry that, you know, about exactly how this community is being revitalized. So I'm going to leave that there because I think that that's like, for me, that was the greatest hook.
Absolutely. The next one that I have for you is a short story collection. I haven't really talked about a short story collection for a while. So this one I was really drawn to, Daddy by Emma Cline. She was the author of The Girls, which was an acclaimed title that came out a few years ago. The beauty of these stories is in their simplicity. They're straightforward character studies, and I bask in Cline's precision with language. She manages to conjure what she wants you to see in the surroundings, but with a contemplative, easy reference that forwards the mood of the story. There's also a light tension in these stories that she does not fully realize for you, increasing the likelihood that these characters will leave an impression. These are sharp little pieces about California mostly, but not the glitzy glamour of Hollywood, more the stories of the people that are tangential or adjacent to the glamour. Strivers and humans not unlike the reader. So that's Daddy by Emma Cline, just came out in September.
Great. So the next book I'm looking forward to is The Sentinel by Lee Child. So yes, Lee Child has a new Jack Reacher out every single year. What makes this one notable is that Lee Child is retiring from writing the Jack Reacher novels, and he is passing the baton to his brother Anrdrew, who actually is a writer in his own right. He writes under the name Anrdrew Grant. So this first book and maybe one or two others they will co-write, and then they will, Lee will ride off into the sunset and Anrdrew will take over. So as a longtime reader of this series, I'm a little anxious about it, but we'll see how it goes. At least the description of this one seems like it's going to be a typical Reacher. Reacher rolls into town, and this time the town is Pleasantville, Tennessee. He sees some poor guy getting beaten up, so he has to stop it. And then turns out that guy is like the keeper of all the town's secrets, but he's in danger, so Reacher has to, of course, stick around and make sure everything turns out okay.
Right. I'm sure there's already a long list for that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that one comes out later this month, The Sentinel by Lee Child.
All right, awesome. All right, my next one is Blackwood, another entry into the Gothic fiction. It's the current Gothic fiction. In Blackwood, Michael Farris Smith takes us to a small southern town down on its luck and with abandoned storefronts and downtrodden population. Into this come a family of drifters looking for a place to settle. All around town, the kudzu, an incredibly invasive, real plant, has overwhelmed homes, cars, and other structures, and it is in the kudzu that the drifters make their home. But the kudzu holds some dark horrors, secrets the town would prefer to forget. When two children and a friend of our main character go missing, the town must reckon with the overgrowth and what lies beneath. And I just thought this was a really interesting premise. My husband spent a lot of time tooling around in our backyard trying to tackle some invasives, but hopefully nothing as sinister as this. So that's Blackwood by Michael Farris Smith.
Oh my goodness, when I was young, we would go visit my family in the South and kudzu was everywhere. I'm surprised this was the first time somebody's thought to use that in a horror story.
I didn't look into it, but yes, I mean, it is really horrific, how it just overwhelms.
It overwhelms things.
Everything.
So my last book is a book called The Talented Miss Farwell by Emily Gray Tedrow, and another book getting a lot of buzz for this fall. So there are two Miss Farwells. There's Miss Rebecca Farwell, and she's this high-flying art dealer, and then there's Miss Becky Farwell, who is a treasurer in a small Midwestern town. So what people don't know is that they're actually one and the same person. Oh. And Miss Becky Farwell is using the funds from the town to fund her high-flying art life. So obviously that has trouble written all over it. In the reviews, and one of them I'm going to quote, and one of them is from a friend of mine, just make me want to read it more. And so a friend of mine said that it was like a train wreck, and she just could not stop watching. Stop reading to see what was going to happen. Wow. And the reviewer says that Miss Farwell is a character to root for despite your better judgment. So I just think that's fantastic, and I'm looking forward to that one.
That's awesome. Well, that's our show. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to visit our website for the list from this show and other great reading lists. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook for more great reading suggestions. Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you, Jessica.
See you all next time.